After I graduated, I really wasn't sure what to do with my life. I'd felt stagnant for years, almost half asleep. The tiny town where I'd grown up had no future for me or anyone else. I knew that much. And so I followed in the footsteps of so many others before me and took a year off to find myself in the backwoods and dusty roads of the American Midwest. I had the feeling that whatever I was yearning for lay at all times just beyond the next bend, and as I drove in the beaten up sedan my uncle pulled out of a junkyard for hundreds of miles, passing through towns and villages and seeking, always seeking for that thing I couldn't name, I had the sense that surely the end of my journey would be right there waiting for me tomorrow. I drove through summer into autumn until I came upon one particular little town whose name seemed oddly familiar, though I couldn't for the life of me tell you why. I stayed at a motel identical to all the others I'd seen on my journey, and in the morning, on a whim, I took a stroll down Main Street instead of heading out again as I usually did. Something was pulling at me, and I knew at least enough by then to listen to a hunch when it came. The leaves were yellowing, though not quite falling, and the wind hissed pleasantly through the branches as I walked. I closed my eyes and enjoyed the scent of crisp decay, and when I opened them again, a peculiar sight caught my eye. There were storefronts stretched all along Main Street, something I guess supposed to be expected, but alongside the cafes and bookshops and general stores, one of these seemed completely out of place. The facade and signage could have been for any sort of salon, but the folding sign out front proclaimed ear cleaning service, with a picture of a cute androgynous figure in a yukata illustrated upon it. Seeing it, I felt my cheeks unexpectedly flush, and I looked around to see if anyone I knew was watching. Of course, I was visiting a town I'd never been to before in an area of the country that was still new to me, so there's really no reason to fear discovery. Well, of course, nobody was watching me. Nobody cared. In fact, the furtive looking around was certainly more suspicious than if I just walked right in the door. So I took a deep breath and did so, hearing the faint jingle of the bell as I crossed the threshold. Inside, the scent of cloves and cedar met my nose, some sort of essential oils in the air. There was a small waiting area where I was alone, and beyond it, a tall, elegant young man stood behind the reception desk. He welcomed me with a smile and said, "Good afternoon. I don't believe I recognize you. Is this your first time?" I flinched at being addressed so immediately and directly while I was still taking in the scenery, but I stepped forward and nodded with a bit of a gulp. Yeah, I was just looking around. So, what services do you offer here?" The receptionist's laugh was as sharp as the cold morning breeze outside. "The usual sort of thing you'd expect. We offer therapeutic ear cleaning with Japanese mimikaki, as well as ear massage and a hot towel." He lowered his voice conspiratorially. "All courses include a lap pillow, of course." I felt my face flush a little hotter, but forced my voice to remain as professional as I could. "I see. That sounds very nice." I glanced at the chalkboard behind him, where the prices were scrawled in a barely legible hand. What sort of klutz wrote all this down? I wondered. Well, he seems pretty put together, so I won't insinuate it was him. Instead, I spoke up and said, "I like the sound of the 30-minute course. I'll do that." After I paid, the receptionist led me down the hall to a small carpeted room with a curtain over the window that let in gentle sunlight with all of the heat that was sure to come as afternoon came. "Have a seat right there, and your therapist will be in shortly," he said with a wink. I waited for a few minutes in tense anticipation. What exactly was this experience going to be like? I'd always dreamed of getting service like this, but never thought it was a realistic opportunity in my tiny town. Now that I was out traveling, it seemed almost believable that this random American town would have a place just like this, outside of a place that might have a little Tokyo, I suppose. I guess this was just a stroke of amazing luck. And if things turned out well, maybe I'd need to make sure I stopped at this place again on my future travels. The door swung open on wonderfully quiet hinges. The figure who stepped in was a short boy with short, mousy brown hair wearing a powder blue yukata. "Welcome, master," he said in a voice that was confusingly familiar. And then I saw his face. "Alex?" I gasped, springing to my feet in confusion. He looked at least as taken aback as I was. What are you doing here?" His round face went pale as he recognized me, but his hands were full with a tray of tea and supplies, so that was all the reaction he could manage. He glanced furtively over his shoulder, as though to see if anyone had noticed his outburst, then whirled back around. "Here, take this," he begged, and shoved the tray into my hand so he could shut the door. A minute later, we were both kneeling on the ground with the tray between us. Any observer might have been forgiven that nothing was out of the ordinary, unless they happened to see the sheepish expression on the face of my childhood friend, and the bewildered expression on mine. Alex said, "You really mean to tell me you just happened to come through here? You weren't hunting me down or anything?" His voice was about as meek as I'd ever heard it. "This place is so in the middle of nowhere. Is there any chance you just happened to be in the same town as me?" "Believe it or not," I said, "that's the truth. I'm truly just as shocked as you are. Besides, it's not like I picked you out of a photo book or anything. I've never been here before, and they just sent me into this room. I can't say I'm very surprised that you'd end up in a place like this. You were always asking me to clean your ears or comb through your hair for ticks after we'd been outside, even if we never were near the tall grass." His face got redder with every word out of my mouth. I was about to continue providing some of the many examples of times my childhood friend had found excuses to beg me for personal attention when we were younger, but he cut me off. "You know what? Fine. I guess it probably is just a huge coincidence. Weirder things have happened." He glanced away. "So I guess we should get to it?" I could hardly believe my ears. "Really? You want to go through with it? You don't want me to request someone else? I'm sure if we explained the situation, they'd be happy to—" "Stop teasing me," he whined. "We're not wasting anyone else's time. Get over here." Alex scooted around the tray and patted his lap. I feigned reluctance as I settled down with my head on his thighs. His yukata smelled faintly of bergamot, which blended wonderfully into the other scents of the parlor. Alex had always been a scrawny sort of boy, and his thighs weren't exactly the softest pillows in the world, but they felt unexpectedly nice. I was about to say something else teasing, but Alex wasted no time. He leaned over to the tray, picked up a mimikake, and got to work. I flinched as the smooth wood touched my outer ear, but apparently I had nothing to fear. This boy, who'd always been so clumsy and unsure of himself growing up, always asking me to do the sort of thing for him, had apparently gained enough hand-eye coordination to be gentle with paying customers, and not, stab them in the brain. And well, we might be childhood friends, but in this moment I was indeed paying his boss well enough for the treatment I was receiving. I closed my eyes as I felt a gentle tickling against the fine hairs and skin of my ear canal. To tell the truth, I knew that I didn't have much wax to clean. I was so addicted to using Q-tips that it didn't stay around for long. But for the sake of the service, that apparently didn't matter. It was really more of a relaxing massage than anything. And the mimikake brushed a particular patch of skin, and a rippling sensation shivered through my whole body. "You hurt?" Alex asked at once, freezing the mimikake's position. No, I said, surprised at the haziness of my own voice. Just keep going. I'll tap you if it hurts." I put my hand on his leg and squeezed briefly to show what I meant. Maybe that was the wrong thing to do, because now it was he who froze at my touch. After a long moment, he said in a low voice, "All right," and then kept going, his movements a bit slower this time. I could feel my ears flushing hard as he kept teasing and gently scraping at the skin. I recalled blearily an article I'd read about all the nerve endings in the ear canal and how ear cleaning felt so good because it stimulated the vagus nerve, which of course was also stimulated during all sorts of other activities. I was feeling more and more lightheaded as he went. Alex was so gentle that he wasn't irritating the skin at all, no matter how many times he tickled at the same spot. I could hear him whispering something, or perhaps muttering to himself, but couldn't quite make out what it was. At some point, I think I was drifting off to sleep because the sensations I was feeling, the sounds I was hearing, were melding in my head with all sorts of memories from my past, of summers running through the woods with Alex and laughing at funny bugs and mushrooms we found, or sitting indoors on stormy days and eating snacks while watching a movie, all snuggled up together. I remembered the day he left town with his parents, promising to be back to visit soon, and how that visit had only ever happened once. And I felt a tear of shame roll down my cheek as I realized how much I really had missed this boy, but I'd never done anything about it. Nobody else had ever really been my friend like he had, and now it was just random chance that had brought us back together again. Pure chance had done what I could never do on my own. And why had that been? I'd always been too busy to reach out, that's what I told myself, but in truth, hadn't I really been afraid of what I'd learn if I did? Afraid that my friend, always so submissive and dependent on others, would have made a wonderful new life for himself somewhere. A new life with new friends, people he was as close to as he'd ever been close with me. And then I realized the ear picking had been done for some time already, and there was a soothing hot towel draped over my face. "You asleep?" His voice came whispering from above. I said nothing and remained still, not wanting the moment to end. "Good," he said softly. "I could never say this to your face, but I've been so lonely. I'm so happy to see you. Why'd you never call or even write a letter? I can't fucking believe it. It really made me think that all those years meant nothing to you, that I was just always been reading something into a situation that was never more than just friendship. I've been trying not to let it bother me, to just move on with my life now that I'm out on my own, but..." His voice choked up, his body shifting under me and his voice getting louder as it seemed he was leaning his face down to me. A tingle went through me as I could feel his breath on my neck. "So lonely," he repeated. "But whatever the reason, I'm happy that you came to see me." And he gently turned aside a corner of the towel that was rapidly becoming less hot, and he pressed his face close to my ear. Was it a kiss on the cheek? Did he press his face into my hair? I couldn't quite tell, hidden below the towel as I was, but I felt a hot wetness on my skin and realized that Alex was crying too, hotter and more profusely than even I. A minute later, my friend shook me to wake me, and of course I had to make a big show of pretending that I'd been asleep. I sat up and yawned, a very genuine yawn in fact, and thanked him for the service. "I hope you liked it," he said flatly, wearily. His eyes were red and his face puffy from crying. It seemed the ordeal had taken quite the mental toll on him. I didn't bother commenting on Alex's appearance, though I was sure that my own tears were visible in my features as well. "I loved it," I said. "It felt incredible." "Then you should come again," he blurted out, and then looked away. "I mean, you can ask for someone in particular if you really want. Or you could just get whoever's available. Everyone's really good at it." And then I did the most courageous thing I'd ever done in my life. "It wouldn't have felt as good if it was anybody else," I said. "I want you to do it again." Uh, how about I get your phone number? I could ask when you're going to be working next time. I want to do it. And, Maybe tonight we could get dinner or something, hang out. I'm leaving soon, but I I want to spend more time with you if that's what you want. His expression froze, as though he couldn't comprehend what he was hearing. For a moment, I wondered if, now that push had come to shove, he'd run from my vulnerability, flee from the chance to pick apart the past and reveal old pain. But then his expression collapsed. Tears came to his eyes again. He looked away from me. Sure, he said, sniffing. Uh, Here's my number. But as he reached into his pocket, I stepped forward and embraced him, burying my face in the downy hair on top of his head. I'd always been taller than him, and the intervening years had only made this difference more pronounced. I'm sorry, I murmured. I missed you so much, too. We stood there for a long time, until the receptionist came to check that everything was all right. Whatever he'd expected to find, it was clear that he'd never anticipated seeing my dear friend smiling, happy.